What is going on, Mushroom family? Welcome to another episode of the Mushroom Revival podcast. We are bridging the gap between you, our lovely, enthusiastic, passionate listeners, and the wonderful, wacky, interesting world of fungi and mushrooms. We bring on guests and experts from all around the world to geek out with us and go into the portal of what are mushrooms, what are fungi, and to really put a spotlight on how cool they are. So please strap in, tune in, and shroom in to another episode.
Today we have a super special guest, Robin Devine, who is the creator of Black People Trip and a writer for Medium. And we are so grateful that she is willing to take the time to talk to us about her projects and elevate mushrooms in all the spaces. Robin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here and talk about shrooms and all things good. So, yeah.
So let's start with a small bio of you, and then if you want to just kind of give the mission statement for Black People Trip and what you are currently doing with it and what you want to do.
Sure. So I'm a writer by trade. I've been writing for about 20 years. I do freelance, I do ghostwriting, and I'm also a mental health advocate just because of my own background in mental health with my own personal issues. As far as Black People Trip, it's fairly new. I guess it's been around maybe 4 or 5 months now. And my mission with it is to raise awareness, build community, teach harm reduction, promote self-sufficiency, and really just help Black people, or mostly Black women, have a space in this community because we don't have one at the moment. So just creating space.
What inspired you to get into psychedelics and mushrooms, and then to create the space? Was it, has this always been in the back burner? Has it been, a recent event spurred by quarantine and mental health, kind of on the spotlight of, wow, we need a space?
Definitely. I mean, I struggled with depression, like I said, most of my life, but quarantine just amplified it, and nothing was helping. Like I was in therapy, I was on, medication, and I hit a wall. And so I was on Medium reading about other people and their experiences, and ran across a guy that wrote about using MDMA. And he was like, it's like 20 years of therapy in one session. And I was like, whatever that is, I'm in. And so from there, I researched and learned about mushrooms and other types. And yeah, that was my intro into it. So yeah, quarantine did spur this on, definitely. As far as why I created it, because I found it to be very white. It was like no Black folks. It was like, well, I know we're out there, but I literally could not find any. And so I said, why not create a space for us too? Because we need that. I mean, I think it's important to be able to heal in a community that feels safe for people. And I know for me, sometimes it's all women, sometimes it's all queer folks because I'm queer as well, and sometimes it's all Black folks. So that's why I made the space. It's so far been very well received. I'm grateful.
Absolutely. I actually found you through your Medium article titled Why Don't More Black People Use Psychedelics? And it was broken down in such a clear-headed, digestible way. I think you provided very practical, tactical ways that we can reform the space or build it in the first place. But I would love to visit those 5 reasons. But before we get into the do's and don'ts of this space, could you tell us your first experience with psychedelics? What was that like? How did you discover it? Were you Googling? Did a friend tell you about it? What was your first confrontation with mushrooms and or psychedelics?
Yeah, again, it's back to that Medium article that I found that the man wrote. And in it, he shared about how he had a guide. And, so I emailed him. I didn't know him, but I said, hey, who was your guide? And he actually wrote me back and said, this is her. She's in New York. And I emailed her and went from there. First experience was incredible. It was the first time that I felt real true self-love and acceptance. And I was like, this is what mushrooms can do. And so I was in from the first experience. And it was beautiful. So
Was it the second experience that was a little rocky?
yeah. The second one was not as lovely. It was around the time that the protest had started, and all the upheaval, and everything was just, falling apart, and being Black was like extra hard right then. And so I'd gone in for my second session with the sitter, and we were talking about, just what was happening in the world, and it seemed to have no impact on her. Like, she didn't get the gravity of what was happening, and to me, that hurt my heart, because I was like, I get that you're not a Black person and you don't feel it the way that I feel it, but there was like no empathy for what was happening to Black folks. And so I went into the trip just very hesitant and very guarded, and I couldn't let go, and really, so it wasn't my best trip. So yeah, that's also why I think it's important to be able to have access to guides of color, so that we're not having to question, is this someone that's safe emotionally for me to let go with.
And probably with all aspects of intersectionality of, because I'm sure it's not only being Black, but also queer, also a woman, all these things feed into each other, and to be able to dig into those traumas and those sensitive spaces, and to be able to just talk and not, walk around things or hide certain things because you're fearful that they might have a different political view. And that's hard if you're just raw under that psychedelic space where it's just, I'm so vulnerable. And if I have a feeling that they're a white supremacist or something, it's like that is not okay. And I believe this, this medicine should be accessible to everyone. And for first timers or even experienced people, having a guide is really important, just to talk things through, or if you take a massive dose, just to help you walk to the bathroom, or just these small little things where you're just not a capable human being anymore. So I think that's super important. I think this work especially now where mental health is the forefront of, not only in the United States, but the world. I think everyone globally right now is yearning for healthy spaces and healthy modalities to explore trauma, explore mental health, and to do it in a really safe and healthy environment. I think that's crucial.
Definitely. You mentioned like having someone help you go to the bathroom. That second trip, I had to go to the bathroom, and I was so like shaken. And she was like, "Need help?" I was like, "No, I'm good." And I crawled instead of like letting her help me, because I was so in such a bad space. So safety is so important, and safe spaces.
I was laughing. You found a picture of your mom taking acid with some guys in togas, right?
Yeah, I did. My mom passed away, God rest her soul, passed away many years ago, but she was a total hippie. And like, yeah, she was, if she were here now, I know we'd be tripping together. I have no doubt we'd be doing acid. So yeah, drugs were not a new thing for her, so I was very open to them thanks to her.
That anecdote about you and the white woman for the second session with this white woman who you were like, oh, are you a supporter of you know who? And just kind of seeing through like, oh, we're just not aligned. And that really stuck with me as like how crucial this is to create, first of all, get facilitators of color, and then connect everybody. So let's get into like what we can actually do. The first thing in your article was why don't more black people use psychedelics, was that they don't know about them. Why is it such a white people thing? I mean, I have my own ideas, but I would love to hear what you have to say, and then how we can kind of expand the awareness of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about my my own thoughts about it. And, for me, when I hear psychedelics, I think about hippies, and hippies are generally white folks, My mother, although she was black, her main crew of friends were white, which is why I think she was into them. But I think that wasn't our space, and I don't know why. I actually don't know. I don't know. I just think psychedelics, LSD, hippies, not us. But that's not true. Because we're out here too, just looks very different. And also, I think festivals are where I think of them being available a lot. And I don't see many Black folks at like raves or festivals, things like that, where these things show up.
Yeah, I picture like the Grateful Dead and the 60s and the 70s, and that's when psychedelics came here the first time, and it didn't go as well, and now we have this new psychedelic renaissance. So let's make it a rebirth. That's what renaissance means in French, is a rebirth, and let's do it right this time.
And I think it goes into the second point, which you brought up in the article of disproportionate rates of incarceration, right? And as white people, most of the time we're not as afraid of being incarcerated holding mushrooms, or there's an example of I've been at a mushroom festival and hearing someone talk, and happened to be he's passed away now. His name is Gary Linkoff, and he was giving this presentation about how he's finding so many different types of magic mushrooms in Central Park in New York City. And he showed this picture of him holding a tackle box with all these different species right next to a police officer. And he's like this old white guy, and he looks so harmless, and I'm sure he's has this level of quote unquote sophistication and the way to name the Latin names and blah 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 to come across as not a druggie, and to pass all those societal norms, so to speak, as not a criminal. He's just a harmless old white guy, and he said that as I'm not worried because of who I am, and that privilege of just who I came into this life embodying, right? And it is a privilege, and it starts at our legislation, and it's helping a lot, with decriminalization in certain cities. It's helping, but it starts at legislature, and I'm just curious of your views on this as well, and how can we make positive change?
As a Black person with mushrooms, I think about, personally, I'm terrified. The first time that I ordered them in the mail, which I will never do again, I picked them up and then sat in my car and waited for the cops to come get me, because I just knew that I was being, watched or, something. That fear was so present in me. The fear on this side is very real. As far as legislature, the word you said that I cannot pronounce right now. There's so much work to be done, because the rates of incarceration for Black folks just for like weed violations are ridiculous. It's, we're making small steps, but there's a long way to go before I think we're comfortable enough to even think about showing up the way that white folks do with mushrooms or other psychedelics in the world. Like, we can't just go out and say, yeah, there are times when I post online and I'm like, should I say that? And I do anyway, because I don't care in the end. But it's very different on this side. That's why we don't do it a lot, because we're scared sometimes.
Right. And I think a practical thing is police reform and trying to dismantle the biases of just if the situation unfolds and the person is a person of color or not, they typically go very differently. And if we could reform the police, obviously that would help. That's a monumental effort, and it's not something that an individual can necessarily do other than, doing your part in self-education and calling your representatives, whatever. But do you have anything to say for an individual? And, if we see something on the street, someone being interrogated by the police, doing something like interfering, or perhaps it's something a little different, like if you are providing this medicine to people, maybe developing a safe space for people of color to access it in ways that they can't right now. Because, people are reaching out on Instagram and Facebook and texting their friends and stuff, and there's people hiding in all these corners. You have to go gingerly about this to obtain it in a safe way. But yeah, do you have any other practical things that we can do on an individual level if we're in this space?
Yeah, actually, something about non-people of color saying, I see the bias, I know that it's present and very real, is very helpful. So when people say, I know that I have privilege, I know that I there is bias against you, just even saying that and being aware of it and saying it out loud helps for some reason. I don't know why, it just does, for me personally. As far as getting involved, yeah, I actually always appreciate that. When there have been times when I've been out and having not altercation, but a tiff of something with something that's uncomfortable, and someone stepped in that not a person of color, I was grateful. So if you do see something, step in, and I think it's going to take all of us to really make a change and get involved and not be afraid to step up and be there for each other as advocates and as safe spaces.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to sit at home and be upset about the disproportionate rates, but it's another thing to vocalize how upset you are, whether it's with a representative or even your family who, they're not like, I'm not racist, or, whatever kind of dialogue they have going on, but just bringing that conversation into even the most casual spaces can be effective, because then it's just drilling in that this is a civil rights current event and it's important, and the reform is happening whether you like it or not, and you can't look away from it. Giving people the ability to go home and be in their comfort zone and not think about it is ultimately not that productive if they're the people that are feeding the system and putting their dollars into areas. So,
and I mean, you talked about having family conversations. Yeah, there are some things that I can't be a part of that only you all can do. Only you can talk to your family and your friends about what's happening and in those spaces. I'm not there. So, I think it's about non-people of color having their own conversations on their own about what's happening and what they can do to make change, not just reaching out to us and saying, what can we do to help you, but saying, what can we do on our side or on our internally to make a real effective change.
And the third, for lack of diversity within the space, that I think your story about not being able to find a facilitator or guide of color was super important. So what does this space currently look like, and what kind of advice would you give to someone exactly in your shoes, a person of color who's queer, all these minority demographics who wants a guide and can't find one that they align with? What would you say to that person if they're really craving this therapy?
That's a tough one, because first of all, I think that there are so few out there. They're out there. But the fact that the world is the way it is right now, would shut down, it's hard to actually physically be with someone. So even the ones that are available, we can't get to them. So I'd really suggest people learning how to be their own guide for right now until things change. And that would mean, doing your own research, talking to people, joining groups. Of course, going very slowly so that you are still safe, but just taking your own health into your own hands for now until we're able to, really connect again on a physical level and see each other. That would be the first thing. The second thing is find communities, because although there aren't many, they are out there. I found them. One is the People of Color Psychedelic Collective. And that's a great resource for people of color, not to really find a guide, but just to meet people that are in the field and doing the same kind of work. And as you talk to folks, you'll find your people and your person. So just connections, community. But for now, just trip it home safely on your own.
I also want to give a little plug to Omar Thomas that we had on our show, and he made the Diaspora Psychedelic Society. And he has retreats in Jamaica and Mexico, and I think he's trying to expand it, but just trying to keep in that legal framework and to really help that trauma, right? And that that PTSD for people of color, and make that platform where you have guides that are people of color. You have guides that know what that trauma and PTSD is, and how to navigate it, and how to talk about it, how to work through it in this psychedelic space. And another person I just have to give a shout out to is Kalindi, where rest in power. He just left his body not too long ago because of COVID, but he is so amazing in his talks of empowering the stories of psychedelic use of people of color, especially, Black people in Africa using mushrooms, and, in Egypt and West Africa and all these different, countries, and telling stories of, it's not just hippies. It's not just hippie white people taking mushrooms and tripping out at festivals. This is thousands of years old of history, rich history. And these are, roots that we can tap back into. So a lot of his stories are still online, and you can watch videos of him, and he's an incredible person for sure.
I found his work literally about a month before he passed, and he had such a huge impact on my entire journey, which is very short, but he was definitely an inspiration. And you talk about the trauma. I mean, I think it's in our DNA, it's in our bones, and it's having people that understand that is important. I hate to say it, but even as a Black person, I don't know a lot about the history of mushroom use in Africa and other Black spaces. I have no clue about the history, and I'm learning now. I'm reading, I'm trying to find out, but it's out there. So we need to know about this too. It's important history. It's culture. It's like, it matters.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was erased, right? We asked Omar this, and he was like, I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm dedicating my whole life, and it's hard to find that information because a lot of it was erased purposely to keep that power, from Black people, and those roots and those stories and practices. And you have to dig, and you really have to find them out, and it's a lifelong journey that I'm blessed that we have the internet, and we have platforms that we can share more effectively and faster, right? And so when one person finds a bit of information, they can blast it out, and they can share like wildfire.
One thing I loved about Omar's website was he shares their Spotify playlist.
Okay.
That's made for when you're journeying.
Yes.
So that could potentially serve as, some type of comfort, and just knowing that other people had listened to the same sounds as you when you're in that space.
Yeah. It's so funny you say that. When I was doing my own journey with my guide, we used her playlist, which was lovely, beautiful, but it wasn't like, it didn't touch me, and I want something a little bit different for my journey. So even just that little small tweak can make such a huge difference. And you keep saying Omar. I feel like Omar and I have a call coming up, but I can't recall this man's name because he's in Jamaica, you said, correct? Yeah, I think this is him. I think we are connected, or going to connect soon. So
great. Yeah, he's a good one.
Yeah.
It was spontaneous, our meeting, and after we talked, it was like, why haven't we talked in the past? And I'm really excited to see his work, blossom, and I think it can have a huge impact like yours. And you're writing a book, right?
I am. Yeah. Because there are none out there, which I couldn't believe, like about a Black woman and psychedelics, even mental health. There are so few. So I was like, let me go ahead and share my story, and so someone can see themselves in it, because I have a ton of books, about mushrooms and this great stories, but I don't see myself in there. So I am writing that. Hopefully that'll be out in the next, who knows when. So we'll see. We'll see.
But I think that's a really important literature that hopefully that population of queer Black women taking psychedelics will just grow, because as you've experienced, the healing from that can be pivotal. And you can actually go into the cellular and molecular trauma and start healing these things and purging them. And we all need it, but especially these communities.
Definitely. I mean, there's the trauma of just the history of being Black in this country. There's the trauma of, own family trauma. There's the trauma of being a Black person now in America. So it's like all these things come together, and it's just a lot to process on your own. Mushrooms, I think we all need mushrooms, everybody. But I think Black folks could really benefit from the power that they offer. A lot of pain in there.
I'm just curious on your kind of practice with them now. Has it just been those two recent journeys with that woman? Have you had a chance to kind of solo journey on your own, microdosing, macrodosing, and kind of like how is it different than anything else you tried, right? Have you tried talking to a therapist or something else? And why is this so profound as opposed to something else?
Yes, to everything you said. I've tried it all. So I've done solo trips. I did like a 7-gram trip when I first started out, and that was what I was like. Because I thought back then more was better, and that's that's not the case. As I was listening to Kalinda Ely, and he was saying, the heroic dose, and how far you can go, and I was like, let me see how far I can go, and it was not good. It was so bad. So I did that. I've done smaller ones at home, which were better and lighter and more profound. I found another guide. Also a white woman, however, it was different. She's lovely. We had a good connection, and I appreciate the heck out of her. So I've done that with her once. I've done microdosing, which I love. And I don't know what it is about it, but I felt like a human. Like I could get up and face life every day, which I had never felt before. So, yeah, I totally advocate for microdosing. And I tried LSD for the first time like 2 weeks ago, but I felt nothing. So I don't know if I just got paper or I don't know. So I'm going to try it again. And yeah, so I'm still trying to find my sweet spot and my medicine and what is, for me.
I really like what you said of just being a human, right? And I feel the same thing. Yeah, on macro and then also micro. And I recently just started microdosing again this week for the first time. And it's been like over a month or a couple months. And it's funny, every single time I eat mushrooms, I say, why don't I do this every day? or, or just all the time. It's just like, it's this breath of fresh air. And it's like, wow, I feel me. I feel more me. And everything feels so special. And like just looking, just on a window and the specks on the window, I was like, wow, there's a beautiful specks on that window. And I would never have noticed. And it's just the smallest little things that like, wow, the universe is really special. I'm really special. Everything is just, it's here. And I can sink into that space. And, every time is different. And sometimes they're a little more uncomfortable and not the funnest journeys, but they're important, right? And you have to go through that uncomfortability to come out the other side a little brighter, a little healthier. So Yeah, I think it's truly a medicine for the people because it's been used by almost every single culture around the world throughout time, over thousands of years. Just and every culture has their own little rituals and ceremonial uses and different species that they use, and it's something that I think is universal for the people, and whatever culture you have in your ancestry, you can tap into your ancestors' use with mushrooms, and I think that's really special, to be able to have something universal that you could also tap into your little niche, and connect with your ancestors, your roots, with mushrooms. So I think that's really important.
You say that and I get chills because like I know so little about my ancestry and mushroom use and the history of it, but I so want to learn. So like I'm so psyched to dig into that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thanks for lighting the torch. I mean, I'm pumped for your book. I think there's so many people out there just like yourself that have no idea, right? And have probably spent their whole life just trying to find something that'll work and just not finding any luck, or some things are all right, and to hear someone just like themselves just say like, hey, this works, and to be able to tap into that place of power and that place of healing is so important, in a space where it doesn't exist, right? Or it's so hard to find. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
You talk about people that are always searching. That was my mother. My mother died very young, 49, but she died super unhappy. But she had tried literally like everything. Like she, retreats and yoga and everything. And it doesn't have to be that way. There are options for people to heal and to just live a decent, happy life. So I do this work not just for me, but for her spirit and my grandmother, who also died very unhappy. And I refuse to go out like that. I'm I'm gonna enjoy this ride. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
I love that you're taking such bold action towards this, and following you on Instagram is a delight. I feel like I get a daily dose of Black People Trip and you going on a rant, and it's just, I love to see the passion slowly building and unfolding, and the GoFundMe is getting more and more money, which is great, although your preference is Venmo.
Yeah, I mean, only because I can, no fees, because I have a card attached to it, but it doesn't matter. It's gaining traction. I'm grateful for that, because really it's just giving me space to write. And that's what I need right now. I need the space to be able to sit and just get these thoughts out of my head and onto paper. Some people can get up at 2 a.m. and write before they go to work or when they get home, and my life isn't set up that way. So
does GoFundMe take a fee?
They do. You take a fee.
Okay, so Venmo is the way to go.
I prefer that. Like I said, I have a card that's attached to it that I can just pull funds out with no fee. So, but either way is totally appreciated and welcomed, and I'm just grateful for however folks want to contribute. And also sharing it helps a ton too. So, if there are groups that people are in and they can share it, that's super cool too.
We will definitely have it in the show notes. We'll put it out in our email blast, our social, but what is your Venmo? Just so people, if they're listening, they can head over and support your book.
Yeah, Venmo is at Devine Robin, and that's DIV as in Victor, INE, Robin. Just my name backwards.
One thing you talked about, not just in the article that was about why Black people aren't using more psychedelics, but in another one I saw on your Medium, and you keep drilling in the fact that decriminalization is essential for the foundation of making this more accessible. And I would love to visit this because I feel like there are some trepidations with decrim, similar to what happened with cannabis right now. It just became like the wealthy white people's entrepreneur space, and it's expensive. I mean, it was cheaper to get a bag of weed from your dealer than it is to wait in line and get it from a dispensary. So yeah, how do we not let this happen with mushrooms? I've heard Omar Thomas talking about the importance of teaching cultivation and just allowing people to bring this medicine into their own home, and then it's decriminalized. So with that setup, you should be relatively safe and self-sufficient. But what other things should we be considering as this shroom boom is so eminent? I mean, we are seeing companies pop up all over, especially in Canada, of like the next psilocybin product.
Nuts.
It's so soon, and it's going to be massive. And I really want this renaissance, so to speak, to be healthy and like actually do profound work.
I know, me too. It breaks my heart when I see that the big tech companies. I think I put out a post, I think it was this morning, about, I was reading something and it said something about psilocybin and tech and $92 million. And I'm like, no, like whatever that is, I don't want any part of that. It's almost, I can see the train heading off the track, like in the wrong direction, and I don't know how to stop it. I don't know how to do that, because cannabis, what's happened to it, I think it's awful. Like right now I buy from a dispensary and it's like a freaking Apple store when I go in, whereas 10 years ago, if I bought that on the street, I'd be in jail right now. And so as far as how to not have that happen again, I don't know, because it's such a fast moving train. As far as it being cultivated at home, I'm all for that. But for that to happen, we need it for it to not be criminalized, and we're not there yet. So I don't know. I wish I had a good answer for that, but I'm actually afraid of where it's going to go.
It's tricky. It's really tricky, because it is kind of distasteful to see such a profound medicine be monetized like that and brought into capitalism. But I'm also wondering, like, if we do that, what if it changes big people's minds, like people with lots of money and people with a lot of authority and power, and if they would only take a mushroom if some rich company sold it for overpriced.
Out of an Apple store.
Yeah. So it's almost like I feel like we need it in all the spaces. But I'm worried that there's going to be a monopoly, or that this monster will just be the only version. And then there's the people who cultivate it at home. And yeah, how do we balance that and kind of create a medium almost? So it's not just a home scale thing, and it's not just big tech, but it's casual. It's like coffee, everybody can go grab a coffee, and it's for all socioeconomic statuses. And
yeah, I mean, I see myself like in the middle of that. Like, I'm not a home person just doing it for my own use. I'm trying to actually be in the middle of big pharma, big tech, whatever, and just home use. What I want to do is I want to teach women, Black women, how to be guides for each other, how to grow, how to create their own little pods of use, and I want these pods to be in every city and all over the country, so that it's not, they aren't dependent upon a tech company for their healing or their medicine. So I think one way to do that is just educate people and say, hey, you can do it yourself. You can do it in community, and this is how you do it. And yeah, so it's not just the one person doing it on their own, but it's little pods that will, I think, ripple out and make a bigger impact. That's what I hope will happen.
Yeah, and I'd love to be able to have it decriminalized, to be able to grow it in your own home, because it's cheap, and it's most people have more green thumbs than they do mushroom thumbs, right? And plants are way easier for people to wrap their head around. Mushrooms are just they're alien for most people. And although it's not so hard, it's just a lot of the techniques are really foreign, just because people haven't really worked with fungi or microbiology, right? And so to be sterile, or a lot of these practices are just so unheard of for people, and And a lot of people don't have time or space in their home, especially if around COVID. I mean, or even not COVID, they don't have an extra space in their tiny apartment or to have a grow op, you know? It's and then time at the end of the day when you're exhausted from work to take care of these mushrooms, to harvest them, to dry them, whatever. It's like I barely have enough time to take care of myself, let alone these other beings, you know? And so I think there needs to be a lot more decriminalization in transferring those mushrooms person to person. And I think, you know, to be able to sell it to your friend, and to have those communities, those nodes that you're talking about, and not be penalized, because, you know, if big companies want to do it, so be it. But there needs to be a platform set up to where if people don't want to go to those stores or don't want to pay a ridiculous amount of money to go to a retreat or go to, you know, to sit in to have, you know, a doctor have kind of what they're doing in Oregon, you know, in a hospital, to have a psychiatrist lead you through a trip. I think if people want to do it at home with a network, they should be able to, and just set up laws and all across the country, all across the world. I think it's really important.
I totally agree, and I totally get what you said about it being it's an investment of time, of energy, and personally, I don't want to do that. Like I read the blogs about how to do it, and my mind just shuts down. It's like the spores and the what and the, but I know I'm going to learn eventually because I needs to be skills that I know. But like I would love to move to Oregon, and I might because I'm a nomad at heart, and you know, to grow and sell to people. I'd love to do that. So I'm hoping that pops up more people doing just what you said, just growing at home and selling to their friends and family, and it not being a huge deal, you know, and because growing is intensive.
It is. It's intimidating, even for me as someone who's been growing mushrooms for like 7 years now. I'm still just like, oh, there's always a possibility of contamination, and it's a lot of work and failure inevitably. So community grow ups, like if you could get one person in your community to dedicate their garage to this space and everyone pitches in to, you know, maybe get a pressure cooker or kind of tend to it, I think that could be really fun and really beautiful, and I hope to see more of that pop up. I'm seeing it with cannabis around. I think even here in Austin there was someone growing, and it's definitely not legal here. It's decriminalized and you can only get it with a medical card, but that's very unlikely because
even Texas is wacky. I didn't even know how wacky it was until we moved here. Then I looked at the laws and I was like, whoa, we are back in time. Austin is a little more chill than the rest of Texas, but it's like, whoa, yeah, it is way back in time. I mean, medical here is like, I think I was reading it's like only a rare form of some thing where you get seizures, but you need it. Basically, the article was like, it's possible, but it's really not. And only like a couple people have it, and to really get it, it's near impossible to get a medical card here. So, yeah.
Okay. Texas.
But
all right.
but it takes, you know, like those few politicians to have access to it, to be like, whoa, I want other people to have access to this, and let me change the laws, right? And people who have great influence to make huge change politically, I think if they have access, I'm all on board. I think that every new president, every new politician, should have a mushroom journey.
Agreed.
and then let them, you know, and then maybe an up every quarter or like year, just to make sure they're back on track and in line with the mushroom integrity. But
it would be a whole different world, country, everything would be different if I totally agree with that. Being political has never been like, I've been involved, but never total like, out there in the streets. But now I'm really beginning to become passionate about legislating for decriminalization, because we got to do this. If it's going to be accessible, have to.
And even forwarding with that, I think white people have to be careful, because I've seen this in certain psychedelic scenes where if you have the money and the ability to take time off of work and integrate and don't have a whole lot of trauma to work through, and you take a psychedelic trip in Peru, you take some ayahuasca, and you come back, I've just seen people almost feel self-righteous about that, and like all-knowing, and more like this enlightened being that these other people aren't. And that could just create an even bigger divide if we're not careful. And unfortunately, I agree, mushroom or psilocybin makes better people, but it's not just like you pop a pill and you get better. It's a lot of work. And for all white people in the space out there who are journeying and doing a lot of deep work in enlightening yourself, that's amazing and that's beautiful, but just stay humble. And it's so tricky, because people will use the stay humble to almost make themselves feel like the bigger person. And it's just this like convoluted internal storytelling. And yeah, we just really got to choose our words wisely, and to break down any of the self-righteous conversations and paradigms that we're instilling on other people.
It's a very sticky space. I mean, the first guide that I worked with was somehow on a bit of a high horse. Like, she had been to Peru many, many times, and she was very, I don't have the word for it, but very, thought she was ascended, and was like this big spiritual being. And I said, "Can you teach me how to trip sit?" And she was like, "Oh no, you're nowhere near ready for that." And I was like, "Well, oh, okay." And then something you also mentioned about people having the money to go to Jamaica and take the time to rest and relax and integrate. After one of my trips, and it was such a bad idea, I actually drove home that night and worked the next day because I had to. I didn't have time to like lay in bed and like process what happened. I had to work. So that's another part of we need. I don't know. We need we need just the space to do the work. The same. We just need space.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks for. I think that's a great point, and I joke a lot of like, I want all politicians to eat mushrooms, but that's not it, right? It's because I've seen psychedelics turn people. They even turn up their knobs even more, and they get even more egotistical with it. What's supposed to be an ego dissolving medicine, it actually turns up their knobs, and whatever stories in their mind, it just cranks them up. So yeah, and it's not all about psychedelics too, right? It's that whole network, and I love how you're talking about how important the guide is and how important just that network of people, because it goes way beyond just the mushrooms. It's just to have that group, that people, the group of people that you can trust and be open with. And even if you don't have time to integrate right after, you can be in a text thread with them and say, can we talk about this throughout the week? And I think that's huge. I think we're forced to be a little more creative during COVID, right? Of it doesn't have to be in person. We can text, we can video chat, we can
a Zoom trip sit.
Yeah, a Zoom trip sit, and
yeah,
it's forcing us to be a little more creative of how we do set up spaces and how we do integrate, and it doesn't need. I think there's not one size fits all. Right. And for the busy people that work a lot, I mean, that'll look different than someone who does have a lot of free time on their hands. And to be able, I think the the real goal is to fit each person with their individualized medicine and healing, right? Because everyone's different, and everyone has their own just unique way of how intersectionality comes together with all their different backgrounds and traumas and XYZs and what works for them. So to make it, to go from one size fits all to individualized is really the journey. And I think I'm just really grateful that you're creating that and having these conversations of, hey, I'm not included in the one size fits all. I'm not part of that all. And
Right.
let's create other options that work for other groups.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm just creating space, and I hope more people will do that. Just create safe spaces. We all need that.
In the end of your article, you wrote, a couple of resources for people to dig a little deeper. We talked about Kalindi. You brought up this podcast with Tonya Pinkins a couple times. I just want to dig in. We talked a little bit about Omar Thomas, but I don't know if you have any resources that you think, if people want to dig a little bit deeper into this, where can they look, listen, watch, etc.?
Unfortunately, there aren't too many, but the couple that I do have, I'm very fond of. I think I mentioned earlier the People of Color Psychedelic Collective. That's a good resource. They're on Instagram, Twitter, all the regular networks. They do host a conference every year, normal years, which brings people together of color that are in the field. And the other one on Twitter that I follow, not Twitter, excuse me, Instagram, is the Sabina Project, and that's Sabina Project. And they actually host online integration circles for people of color. They host in-person Kambo ceremonies, which is another one that I want to try. And they're just a really good resource for information. I actually had it right up in Vogue, I think just last week, which was so cool to see. That actually may be all that I can think of, because like I said, there are so few out there. Yeah, yeah. So those would be the main two for now.
And if you're a listener, if you're listening to this and you have a great resource that we've not shouted out, please comment down below, share it on our YouTube, on our website, on our social, wherever, on iTunes, wherever you're listening to this, comment below so other people can have access to those resources and we can keep spreading them around.
Email me, let me know too, because I want to know. I want to find out everybody that I can that's out there. So yeah.
Cool. And your book's coming out. Do you have a deadline or a goal that you are hoping to release it?
I don't. Well, I'm still in the beginning phases, so I'm still looking for agent publisher. So right now I'm in the book proposal writing process, which is takes a little while. But I would love to have it published by the beginning of next year. It would be awesome. I've had some interest, which is pretty cool, from publishers. So hopefully it'll get picked up.
Yay.
Yeah. So I was like, really? You wanna? Okay. So I will definitely keep people updated on how that's going. Yeah, I'm gonna write a book. So
It's freaking awesome.
thank you. I'm excited and terrified, but thank you.
But what I love is that, to my knowledge, this is a massive topic and there's no book on it. So if you were the first, like, wow.
You know what's nuts to me? I was on on a Zoom call last night with Michelle Janakian. I don't know how to say her last name.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she's really sweet.
Oh, she's awesome, and also Bet Williams, and who they're both so cool. But they were like, "We're the first two women to write books about psychedelics." I'm like, "You're the first two women? What?" And like, that to me was nuts. That there weren't any books by women. Like, forget women of color, just women in general. Like, so.
Wow.
We need more stories by women, women of color, queer women, all of that. We need these stories because they're out there. Because like Michelle's book is like my go-to guide for everything, and then Bet is just phenomenal. So
That's astounding.
yeah, first
Yes,
two women.
this is much needed.
It is.
Thanks for pioneering that and paving the way. It's a big project.
I will do my best. Thank you. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
I'm sure most of your book will be this, but we have a final question that we ask all of our guests, and a lot of times we tweak it depending on who the guest is, but the question is, if mushrooms had the microphone and could say one thing to all Black folks out there, what do you think they would say?
If mushrooms had the mic, I think they would say, you deserve this healing too. This is for you. You know, 'cause we've been shut out of so many spaces, of so many healing spaces. I think they want us to know that they're open and available and here for us, just like everybody else. So you deserve healing would be their message to Black folks.
Beautiful. And I encourage everybody to check the show notes, check out Robin's Instagram, support the book, and all the other amazing resources that we will provide.
Venmo is Devine Robin, right?
Will be in the show notes.
Yeah, at Devine Robin. So it's all appreciated, whether it's $5 or 50. I welcome it. So thank you.
Beautiful. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Again, if you have any other resources or people or, whatever you want to share, please share it, because this is such an important topic and such an important time.
And all of our responsibilities. So.
Definitely.
So please, and again, reach out to us if you have any other guests that you think we should bring on our show or topics that you want us to talk about. We love you so, so much. Thank you so much for tuning in and shrooming in with us for another episode. As always, sending a big hug out to everyone out there. Much love, and may the spores be with you.